purpose of Yahweh is to create a creation and to express himself in it and reveal himself to us. I just want to say that I belong to a school called the Institute of Divine Metaphysical Research. I've been in this class since 1987, and the things that I've learned in this school about the purpose of the Messiah dying on the cross it's very controversial to what the world teaches. And I just want to go and show how that by having a little basic understanding of the Old Testament and this tabernacle pattern, that these things here reveal why this man died on the cross. And we'll find that when we begin with Moses, because we don't just begin with Moses just because we want to, but Yahshua the Messiah said that in John the 5th chapter that Moses wrote about him. And then after his death, burial, and then he resurrects on the third day, and we find this out, that this was a quickening spirit that he resurrected. It's in 1 Corinthians the 15th chapter. It's a spiritual body. Then in 1 Peter the 3rd chapter, it's a quickening spirit. And then I believe you read in Mark the 16th chapter, it was another form. Because when he resurrects, he appears to two of his disciples and they don't recognize him. So there's something going on there, and with this resurrection. The death part, everybody can understand a death. You go to a funeral, you see the death, then you go out to the cemetery and you watch people be buried. But it's the resurrection that people can't comprehend, because one, you can't see it, because it's in a spiritual realm. And that's why when we go back here and we begin with Moses, we'll find out that Moses had a vision at a burning bush. And this bush could only be seen by Moses. So if I by chance happened to be walking by, I wouldn't have been able to see that bush on fire. I wouldn't even have been able to hear the conversation that he was having with it. He would just look like a crazy old 80-year-old man talking to a bush from on the surface, if you're just walking by, just happen to be watching him, tending his sheep out here, because because the story is that when he comes up out of Egypt, he fled because he killed an Egyptian. And so when Yahweh caused him to be at a certain place at a certain time, next to a bush Yahweh wanted to appear to him, Yahweh reveals his name to Moses in this burning bush. So when Moses asked the question, he says, when I go down unto the children of Israel, not Pharaoh, and say unto them that the Elohim of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me unto you. See, the children of Israel down here in the land of Egypt at that time, they're going to ask him, what is your name? Because as I've done in the past in the research that I've looked into, you got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was after the flood that in the original Hebrew text, you'll find that they were calling him Aya. Now, before the flood, you can find two different verses. One with Eve. She says, I have gotten a man, even Yahweh. But in the original, it says Yah. And then Seth has a son named Enosh. And it says, then began men to call upon the name of Yah. And then after the flood, you'll find different scriptures where Abraham is calling him Aya. And like I said, this is in the original Hebrew. And when the scripture translators came across these, the masculine portion of the father's name, Yah, that Yahweh, that when they saw this, they still put the word Lord. And I've learned over the years that I got a Scofield Study Reference Bible, and in the Malachi, between Malachi chapter 3 and 4, that Scofield and them put a flyleaf in there to explain that wherever the word Lord is written in their Bible, that they substituted the true name Yahweh. And the whole world, they have this King James Version Bible, so they instantaneously believe that the name is the Lord. And because that's what they got written script for that. So they took out, let me just do this real quick. So they took out the name Yahweh, which was these 4 letters, the Tetragrammaton, and they inserted Lord. And you'll read in 7 different places in the King James the name Jehovah. Jehovah is actually written in 7 different places in the Bible, and you can easily find that out. Just look up the word Jehovah in a Strong's Concordance, and you'll see that it's only written in 7 places. And the places that I've learned over the years that it was written is that's right here. It's describing things that have happened, like Yahweh of hosts, Yahweh of righteousness, Yahweh the healer, Yahweh provider, Yahweh the banner, Yahweh the shepherd, and Yahweh's the rest. So events had occurred wherever you find the name Jehovah written in original script. So when Moses goes back down into the land of Egypt, he goes before Pharaoh, and Yahweh causes this event of Pharaoh 10 plagues and the children of Israel to come up out of Egypt. We now recognize it in our time frame as an Exodus. So this Exodus is where Yahweh brings the children of Israel after 3 months. They slay a lamb in the land of Egypt. They come to the Red Sea, and Yahweh parts this Red Sea. And I might as well bring it up here real quick. This cloud that they are introduced to has an angel in it, and it's in the 14th chapter of Exodus. And this angel is a principle of spirit. And angels cannot be seen with a natural eye. And you can't hear them with your natural ears either. An angel cannot be picked up with natural senses. So the angel, that was in this cloud, now he led the children of Israel 3 months into the wilderness, and they come to Mount Sinai. And it was the top of Mount Sinai that this cloud that has an angel in it in the 14th chapter of Exodus, the same cloud now sets on top of a mountain. I kind of did some little looking into some research into this, and in that region, I don't have a Daniel's chart, but the Red Sea is shaped like a letter Y, and the bigger portion of it is pointing towards the southeast, and the Y section of it is pointing towards the northwest, the way the angle of the Red Sea is over there between Africa and then where Israel originally ends up as we see it today. So the Red Sea, when I looked into the mountains over there, the smallest mountain that I found was around about 3,000 feet above sea level, and then the largest one in that region was just a little over 9,200 feet. So I got to thinking, because in history, the Mount Sinai, along with some other mountains, are missing. They just can't find certain mountains in the records. So Mount Sinai is one of those that they can't locate. And when he sets this cloud atop of this mountain, and then he reveals himself to Moses in vision form, because you'll find that Moses, when he goes up this mountain, there are three principal trips that, because you'll read in Exodus from the 19th chapter all the way to the 34th chapter, Moses, he's 80 years old, and he goes up this mountain 8 times. That's a lot of times. I actually got over here, I got all the scriptures written where he goes up, comes down, goes up, comes down, goes up. So he does it 8 times on top of this mountain. Now in IDMR, we use three of these trips of him going into this mountain. Exodus chapter 20, because a law is spoken, and he's writing that law in a book. And we find that this book was originally started in Exodus the 16th chapter. So Exodus chapter 20 is the first principal trip. Exodus chapter 24 is the second principal trip. And then Exodus chapter 34 is the third principal trip that Moses goes to the top of this mountain. Now, me personally, I use Exodus chapter 24, the second principal trip, more than I do the other two. Because, of course, the first principal trip is the speaking of the law, chapters 20, 21, 22, and 23. Those chapters are dedicated to the speaking of the law and Moses recording it. In the 24th chapter, Moses, Aaron, his brother, older brother, and Aaron's 2 sons, Nadab and Abihu, and then Moses was told by Yahweh to pick out 70 elders from out of the children of Israel. And you read in Exodus that Yahweh is going to put his spirit that's in him, in Moses. He says this in the book. He says, Moses, he says, now you pick out 70 elders, and the same spirit that's in you, Moses, I'm going to put in the 70 elders. Now that's the Holy Spirit that was in Moses. So he says, I'm going to put my spirit in those 70 elder men that Moses is told to pick out. So when Moses picks out these 70, now Yahweh himself, and it is a beautiful, great mystery, but Yahushua was Yahweh Elohim in a body, and it was Yahushua that was telling him, now you invite your brother Aaron, your 2 nephews, Nadab and Abihu, and these 70 elders that you picked out to come atop of this, or to come up this mountain and to stand at the plateau. So apparently in this mountain there was an area where you could rest for a minute. Now we see this in mountain climbing today, where men will start at the base, and they call it base camp, and then they go halfway up, and they always stop at a plateau where they can set their camp up and make that what's known as a secondary base camp. And then the word summit means the top of the mountain. It's the highest point you can go. So, and something, because the founder of this school, Dr. Henry C Kinleys, on June 6, 1931, at 9 o'clock in the morning, he claimed to have talked to Yahweh in Springfield, Ohio. And so Ohio, as we know, up in this regional area, Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, all this whole area up in this section is mountainous. It's a mountainous area. So when Moses goes to the top of this mountain, he sees Yahweh Elohim, and then the 73 that were coming up with him at the plateau, they see Yahweh Elohim also. And once that vision was cut off, then Moses and Yahushua go up all the way to the summit. So they go further up into it, and it says that Moses entered into the cloud. And so you'll find that this cloud is a phenomenal cloud that when he enters into it, that Yahweh reveals to him this tabernacle pattern and the 7 days of creation inside this cloud. That, like I said earlier, when I did some research in the mountains, that I found that the highest one being about 9,200 feet and the smallest one being around 3,000 feet above sea level. When a cloud sits on top of a mountain like that, you'll see that on the smallest scale, the cloud would have been about a half a mile long, and then the highest mountain, it would have been close to 1.5 miles in length. So this cloud, the same cloud, after Yahweh revealed to Moses this tabernacle pattern, had him build it out here in the wilderness, the same cloud came down off that mountain once the tabernacle was built. This is in the 40th chapter of Exodus. That same cloud sits upon a little tabernacle pattern. Now, the tabernacle at its largest is 150 feet long and 75 feet wide. And then the inner part of it, which is the most holy place, is only 15 feet tall. See, and then there was an empty space section that went around this tabernacle. We got it drawn a little bigger here for demonstration's sake. So the same cloud that at its smallest could have been 0.5 mile to its largest would have been 1.5 miles in length, suddenly comes down and sits upon a tabernacle. And I got to talking with somebody about this, that from a scientific point of view, that when an object is away from you, let's say a limousine is 1,000 feet away from me, and I'm on a flat plane with it, and the closer I get to it, the more its true size is proportioned to me. So once I get really close up to it, to 10 feet, from 1,000 feet to 10 feet, it's reached its final. It never changed size. The car never changed size. It was my distance between me and it is what kept changing, and it brought it into more perspective. So I thought this is kind of interesting that here you got a cloud that's sitting on top of a mountain. So it's going to be rather huge. It's going to be big on top of this mountain. And then suddenly it comes down off that mountain and sits on this tabernacle pattern, and it got smaller. Now, from a natural standpoint, that doesn't happen. It should have gotten bigger the closer it got to the children of Israel, but it didn't. It remained a cloud, and its perspective size matched that object that it was going to rest upon. So that cloud was not a natural cloud that they were following up out of the land of Egypt. And this is something that I thought was interesting. I learned in this school that this cloud, at nighttime, it appeared as a cloud, a pillory, fiery cloud to the Israelites, but it remained darkness to Pharaoh and his host. Because you read in there, see, a lot of movies show it with it being like fire and keeping the Israelites separate from the Egyptians. But it was just the mere fact that it was so dark that the Egyptians couldn't see the children of Israel. So that cloud remained a pillar of fire to the Israelites, coming up all the way up out of the land of Egypt until they finally went through the Red Sea. And you'll find that it remained to be like that, a pillar of fire by night, and it was just a cloudy pillar during the daytime. So this cloud for 40 years out here in the wilderness with the children of Israel was a vision, a phenomenal vision. Yahweh was just allowing that to cause that to remain as a vision. That's why we reference it as a phenomenal cloud. And I heard someone one time express that it was an ethereal cloud, because the word ethereal means not quite natural, but not quite spiritual. it's something you can see, but it's really not there naturally. So but it looks like it's in front of you naturally happening, but it's not. And I seen in science today something called what the science world calls dark matter. It's an element. It's negative matter because it's just the way that its properties are. They know it's there, but they can't see it yet. They don't have an instrument that can pick it up, but they know it's there because of the effect that it's having on the stars and the galaxies around it. So they know something's going on in all that blackness out there. You can see it. It's real. It's our universe, but it's an example of something that's ethereal because it has a physical effect on other things around it, but you can't see it directly. And I've always thought, like with air, you can't see air until it builds up as dust particles and water molecules in the atmosphere, and we call those clouds. So those clouds, that's why Yahweh himself chose a cloud to depict himself. Because, you read throughout the scriptures that a cloud, they follow that cloud out of Egypt. It sat upon the tabernacle pattern, sat upon this mountain. It descended upon the disciples when they were with Yahshua atop of a mountain here, Mount Tabor. And then you can hear a voice being spoken in this cloud. And Leviticus chapter 16, Yahweh said, I will appear between the two archangels in the cloud. And that was going to be done on October 10th under the law with the children of Israel. As long as they had this tabernacle pattern, he would appear between the two archangels upon the mercy seat. So that, and Leviticus the 16th chapter is where you can read this. So Yahweh appears as a cloud. And I thought it was kind of interesting. One day I was reading the book of Job, that in the first part of that, the first two chapters, Yahweh's talking to the devil. And the conversation is about his servant Job. And you'll find that one of the things that Yahweh uses to demonstrate his power is a tornado. And this tornado come out, killed all of his children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. And one of the servants survived, and they came to him and told him. And then you read in there that each time a servant came and told Job a devastation took place, that another servant was coming up on him at the same time. So he was suddenly getting overwhelmed with destruction and devastation. But I don't know, I just thought this was kind of interesting that Yahweh starts out destroying everything Job had with a tornado. And then in the 38th chapter of Job, Yahweh uses the exact same thing to talk to Job. He uses a tornado. So what was used in destruction in the beginning, a cloud in the form of a tornado, now suddenly becomes a conversation piece. So here's Job talking to Yahweh in this tornado. So Yahweh in the scriptures, he's using manifestations of things that I've learned over the years as both mysteries, and maybe I'll get into that one of these days. I'll try to record that, show how both mysteries are identical to each other using the natural creation and the scriptures. So where was I? Okay, so this cloud has no particular shape and form to it. So Yahweh uses this cloud as a visionary form. So when we look at these scriptures, we got like Exodus chapter 25 verses 8 and 40. This is a tabernacle that was revealed to Moses top of Mount Sinai. And then Hebrews 8 and 5, Paul says that this tabernacle was a type and shadow of heavenly things. And then Revelations 21 and 3 says that this tabernacle is dwelling among men. Okay, and then 1 Corinthians 3:16 talks about the physical body being a temple. Genesis 1:26, Yahweh Elohim steps into the man. Well, in Genesis there it's he breathes the breath of life into the man that he forms. So breath, is what's used for making clouds. And this tabernacle here in the 40th chapter of Exodus, a cloud entered into it, and then that's when Yahweh glorified it. So the breath that Yahweh puts into the natural man starts off the brain, and the brain looks like a cloud because it's gray and white matter. And the whole body, the body can go without food for a minute, and it can go without water for a minute, but if it doesn't get food or water, the physical body eventually dies. But the brain, it can't go. And I was watching a Discovery Channel. It was off one of those tropical islands. There was a man. He was diving for oysters and clams and stuff. And he was able, and they recorded this thing, and I thought it was just phenomenal, man. This guy was underwater for like 7 minutes, holding his breath, just diving, getting these things, bringing them back up to the boat, putting them in the boat. So he would dive between 3 minutes to 7 minutes, holding his breath. So the brain, but he eventually has to come up. He can't stay down there forever. And you'll find that in some cases, I've seen stories where kids have fallen through ice and they're not breathing for 30 minutes, but they're in this frozen ice. And then they come out and then they are revived and they're still functioning correctly to this day. And they were underwater for 30 minutes. So, and that was in cold water. So we know that Yahweh can cause certain conditions to where this brain, it can relax for a minute, as to say, without actual air being brought into the lungs. It's just going to run off of the oxygen that's already circulating throughout the body. And once it depletes that level of oxygen that's physically in the body, then the brain's going to start to act and say, hey, listen, it's going to shut down, and then the individual will pass away. So these other scriptures, they all reference, like 2 Peter 1:13, Job 19, then chapter 25 in Job, and then 2 Corinthians 5, 5th chapter 1 through 4. These all reference the physical body as a tabernacle. So we didn't put this, Dr. Kinley didn't have this chart drawn as just a pretty picture and just to correlate this on his own. This is actually scripturally referenced, that this tabernacle that Moses was shown how to build and set up in the wilderness is also how Yahweh created the natural physical body as a reflection. They reflect one another. It's a structure and function, and then this is a structure and function. So Yahweh set it up to where, as a quick example, now I'm going to try to keep this to 30 minutes because I found that downtime trying to download this onto YouTube. It takes a minute. I don't have a computer. I'm trying to do this with a Wi-Fi signal. Oops. So we got to, so I'm going to try to keep it short just a little bit here. So this tabernacle pattern is a very crucial structure that Yahweh reveals to Moses and them, and it is a true explanation of how Yahweh operates in the Bible stories of the tabernacle pattern. Now, I want to bring this out before I bring it down, that the natural man's physical body and this tabernacle pattern and all the Bible stories are all laid up in this physical body. And I want to bring this out that when Adam was created in the Garden of Eden, And then he was put into a deep sleep, and Yahweh brought, well, Adam was first created outside the garden, and then Yahweh placed him in the garden. Then he put him into a sleep in the garden, and then he brought a woman out in the garden, and then they became one in the garden. So Adam's physical body, if you look at this chart right here, Adam's physical body is every Bible story before it happens. So, like, for example, some of the things I've learned over the years is, like, in Adam's wrist are 8 bones. Now, he's got 2 witnesses to this fact, that there are 8 bones in the man's wrist, Adam's wrist. So this is testifying to an event that hasn't happened yet. It's testifying to a flood that's going to take place. Now, according to Yahweh's purpose, we got 20/20 hindsight. But to Adam, this event hasn't happened yet. So his wrists are pointing to 8 souls that are going to be saved. And one of these bones is shaped just like a boat. See, but this is the unique thing about it too, is that it's one of the 8. So Noah, this is 1656 years into the future, you suddenly have an event that takes place, a flood. So everybody that is born from, like, Seth, Methuselah, Lamech, all the men that are being born, their wrists are testifying to an event that's in their future. That's not revealed to them, that their wrist has 8 bones in it, pointing to 8 souls shall be saved in a boat. they don't know that, but it's an event that's going to happen in the future. So then Yahweh reveals himself to Noah, and then he tells him that my spirit shall not always dwell with flesh. And he says in 120 years, he says, I'm going to end all flesh. And then we found, through this school, the mathematics of it is that Noah was 480 years old when Yahweh revealed himself to him. And then 120 years into the future, it was in his 600th birthday. So, a lot of people did speculate that it was Noah's birthday that Yahweh caused the flood to take place, And then, so like I said, there's a lot of little examples. So Ezekiel 33rd chapter, Noah's preaching what's referenced as blood. Blood in this case is a warning. And he's preaching about something that's going to occur, a flood, a great flood going to cover the entire planet. So, and that's something they just couldn't comprehend that at all, Water, they know what water looks like, dew, you get dew that drips off of trees. So there's at times, because I remember one time I was in a garden, and the dew in the morning was so heavy on the leaves of the tree, it was dripping like rain. And I looked up, and I was like, the sun was coming up. There were some clouds, but it wasn't raining. It was just the dew coming off So I've seen that, And that's why we teach that it hadn't rained like we see rain today for 1656 years. And then Noah was telling them that they got to get in this boat. So the boat was revealed to Noah, and that's why the boat was Noah, because that boat was in Noah's head as a vision. So he was the principle of salvation. It was his words that they had to heed to be able to get into that boat. So, but Yahweh didn't. It's something how that. When you take, like I said, Adam's body, he already put 8 bones in the wrist to reveal that only 8 are going to be saved in this boat. That's all Yahweh purpose was, 8 were going to get in it. No matter what the movies out there show, I've seen a lot of different Noah movies, and they all show something different. It's crazy the concepts that are out there. So like I said, the cloud, when you look into the universe, now I've seen this picture, and it's in the Eagle Nebula, and it's called the Pillars of Life the pillars of creation, depending on, I guess, what scientists you probably might talk to or what they reference as. The Eagle Nebula has 3 big pillars, and they show suns being born in these clouds. So the whole universe within the galaxies, you got clusters of clouds and suns. That's where the suns are born, are in the clouds in the universe. So when you look at the sons of Elohim, the children of Israel, they were following this cloud that stayed upon this tabernacle pattern. Now, the next time you read the word cloud shows up in Scripture, that is when the temple's built. There's like over 400 years later, the word cloud shows up again. It was with the children of Israel in the wilderness, and then you don't read the word cloud until the temple shows up. And then the cloud fills the temple exactly as Yahweh did back here with the tabernacle pattern. So Yahweh's using the principle of a cloud, see, as a demonstration of his principle of glory. So that's why we didn't choose the word cloud to represent him. He did. And that's why it's drawn around this chart. This cloud encompasses this chart. It's to show that in Yahweh's entire universe, his purpose of salvation and who he's going to reveal that salvation to is inside this cloud. And everything happens inside the cloud. And scientists have shown that the suns, natural SUNs out in the universe, that all the material, the 92 elements of material that they know today as a periodic table, those particles come from the suns, and that's what all the planets are, from Mercury all the way. Now, I still like using Pluto. They don't use Pluto because of, the categorization of what they've referenced, but we do know that there's going to be a 9th planet out there. They just obviously just either haven't found one or one that picks their criteria to use as a 9th planet. So, but we know that Yahweh has set it up that way, that there's going to be 9 planets out there. It's just a question of them finding it. It's just like the pituitary glands. Dr. Kinley puts an Elohim book out, 1961, and then he puts in that book, there are 10 pituitary glands in the human body. Now, he records this in the Elohim book, and medical scientists only had 4 in the 60s. And then it wasn't until the 90s that they found all 10. So you can have something written or revealed, that the world hasn't seen yet. So that's one of the examples. The Elohim book, pituitary glands, science, it took them a while to find all 10. So that's why it'll just take them a minute to find that 9th planet out there. It's just a matter of time. They're looking, it's not they're disagreeing with anything. But the suns, the planets all come from the material that is emanated off of suns, as what they reference as supernovas. So these suns are born in clouds in the universe, in the galaxies. So this cloud that Yahweh chose to flash a Shekinah on October 10th was a reference of salvation in this tabernacle pattern. So when we take these scriptures, like I said, 2 Peter 1, Job 19, then chapter 25, then 2 Corinthians chapter 5, you'll find that when you can see your physical body is a tabernacle, and you can identify your brain as a cloud, and that this is where Yahweh will appear between the 2 hemispheres of the physical body, that the knowledge, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is what he attaches salvation to, and that's going to be in your cloud. So wisdom, I believe that's Proverbs chapter 3, that wisdom is the tree of life. Matthew chapter 13, understanding is attached to salvation. And then John 17 chapter, knowledge is eternal life. So you got those 3 chapters, Matthew 13, John 17, and then Proverbs chapter 3, wisdom, knowledge, and intelligence is your salvation. And like I said, I'm saying I'm kind of going a little over here, but the salvation that we're referencing in this teaching is that it's a knowledge of getting, like the whole world before I came in class in 1987, Christianity world wanted to attach me to a physical law to follow. So when I found out that he was fulfilling scripture, that pulled me away from their garbage, and it pulled me to the truth. Yahshua came in to establish a spiritual covenant with everybody. This law was only given to Jews and Jews only, cardinal ordinances. It was just for the Jews, not the Gentiles. If you were a Gentile and you want to follow those laws, then you had to wait for a Jewish man to buy you and then put a piece of wood in one of your ears and put his Jewish name on that piece of wood. That was the only way you could get into following these cardinal ordinances, is if a Jewish man bought you and then tagged you with his name. And that's kind of, that's interesting. But when he died on the cross, he made everybody one man. Jew and Gentile became one man because of this man's death on the cross. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at that. Like I said, when I go past 30 minutes, it just kind of bogs down my system trying to put this on the internet. So I'm going to stop right here, and thank you very much.